Welcome back, Indiana Sports Speed Radio here on this Tuesday, January 9th, a rainy day. But into each life, a little rain must fall. But we've got the sunshine for you, Mike DeCourcy.
Good morning, Jim.
Gotta love those segues, baby. That's all. That's just all talent, Mike. That's just all talent. Is all that is. Oh, man. Of course, last night, the college football national title game, Michigan and future, I guess you might as well say now current Big Ten member Washington, as their season has come to a close. So the next time you see them, they're a member of the Big Ten. But, man, I think Michigan, I don't care what you think about them, not you, but in the proverbial you, think about them, they are what they are. And that's a tough football team, man. They are just good. They're fast. They're big. They're strong. They didn't make mistakes, and they played like a national champion should. And they get to put that big ring on.
Yeah, I was one of the Sporting News writers asked to make a prediction on the game last week, and I knew that Washington was going to have to score a significant number of points to win. Now, if they had won, I don't think they would have needed to score 35. If they had played more proficiently, if they'd been able to play more proficiently, I don't think the final score needed to be 35, 34. I don't think Michigan would have done as well. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
But I knew that they would struggle with that because I knew that Joe Moore Award and all that stuff. I knew that Michigan would put a pass rush on Penix that he would be challenged by. And that's really, to me, what turned the game. There was also the element of the Michigan offensive line and the seams they created and/or some of the schemes that Washington put themselves in, occasional blitzes into a solid line, and they left huge seams for Michigan running backs. There was one of the, I think it was the second touchdown run by Edwards that you saw a linebacker go soaring into the line, and you're thinking, what is he doing? Why would you take yourself out of the hole or out of plugging the gap? And the reason was it was a blitz. So I don't know whether it was a run blitz or whether they just misdiagnosed the play, but they got crushed on that. That became a 40-yard touchdown run. And those kinds of plays, you can't give up a play like that in a championship game. You give a long pass, but you give up 40-yard touchdown runs, you're not winning the game.
No, and while there were some, the officials wanted to stay out of the game, and they did a pretty good job of that. And certain times I'm like, well, you call that, but you don't call half these other times. Michigan's got a collar wrapped around a guy's throat, but I'm not, even if they hadn't done that, because that stuff goes on all the time. Man, they just looked dominant at the line of scrimmage, and Michael Penix just could not get into a rhythm. His passes were just off. He missed a touchdown on the responding opening drive. He had a touchdown and just missed him. And then there were a couple other wide open passes that he just missed.
He didn't have time. I mean, that's the part that
that's on Michigan.
I think Kirk Herbstreit is phenomenal, but I don't think he gave enough credit to Michigan's pressure in those situations. Why did he miss this receiver? Because he found somebody open for a change before he had somebody in his throat. And so he had to if he felt that he had to get that pass out there and try to get a completion. Okay, that guy down there, that's a second read. That wasn't read number one. Read number one is open. How many times did he get a chance to throw that ball without having to deal with a rush and get his first read? So I'm not blaming him for missing the second read being wide open because he didn't have to get there, and that was so rare that he was going to throw it. So I don't blame him for that. I don't think that he often had even his first read as an option, not because of the coverage in the back, but because he was getting so much heat in so many circumstances.
Yeah, and it's the first time that he's really been pressured like that this year. But of course, he hadn't played a defense like Michigan all year. And, the old adage, defense wins championships. And there's a reason they say that. It's not just made up. It's true because, man, when you can't get anything accomplished, and their running game was compromised a little bit with their running back not being up to speed. But at the end of the day, they took away the weapons that had and there was a lot of balls that were dropped that shouldn't have been dropped by Washington.
Yes.
Some that doesn't happen normally, and it's like, but you know what? When things happen that don't normally happen, there's generally a reason. If it's more than one thing, and there were multiple passes dropped, there were multiple passes missed. So there's obviously a reason those things are happening, and you have to give that credit to Michigan and their defense. And the offense was just mistake free. I mean, they just didn't make mistakes, man.
One thing I thought about as I watched was, I don't know Washington's running back depth situation, but they were sacrificing yards every time they handed the ball to their primary running back. He just did not have the burst that he ordinarily has, that he had for 95 or 99% of the Alabama game. It just wasn't there. And I kept thinking, there isn't somebody else that you could put into the situation. I know that, that they had gotten such great play, but I just think you're trying to win a championship, that you got to take your best shot. And I felt for a lot of that game, like that Washington wasn't necessarily acknowledging the reality of its circumstance, that its starting running back was not the best option it had. And if it was, then they've got real problems with their offense next time around, because you didn't have the running game at the level that you needed to have it in order to put Penix in situations so that he's not facing full-blown pass rushes, because it's 3rd or 2nd and 3 or something like that. And instead, you were always looking at 2nd and 7 at best, and that just wasn't going to help with the weakness, I should say weakness, but the disadvantage of your offensive line having to deal with the defensive line and the pressure schemes that Michigan was throwing at them.
Absolutely. And it was certainly but it was still a fun game to watch, especially when it seemed like Washington, they were never out of the game. They were right there until towards the end, and you knew they're like, oh man, when they got down 2 scores again, you're like, ooh, this is going to be tough. And when he threw that pick, I mean, it's kind of a mistake, but at the same time, he also got rolled up on. So I don't know if it was, I don't know what came first, the getting rolled up on or making
getting rolled up first. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that. And so he forced that pass in there, and that was huge. And that kind of wrapped the game up for him.
Wasn't it 4th and 13? Wasn't that the situation?
Was that the 4th down play? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, it was 4th and 13. So, and he was getting heat again, so he just had to get it out there to see what might happen. I don't think that was really decisive. I do find it interesting the way, the simplistic way in which things are viewed. Okay, what the final score was, at 34-13, I think it was. So people act like it was a blowout. And I guess, if you had $1,000 on Washington to cover, it felt like a blowout or something like that. But the game was 20-13 midway through the 4th quarter. It was a highly competitive game. It was a game in which Michigan was obviously the better team, but the better team doesn't always win. If Washington had been able to create one break for itself, we could have had a tie game, and then it would have been up for grabs. So it was a very competitive football game that kept your interest until the final 3 minutes. I don't think you could ask for anything more than that. And to characterize that as a mismatch or a blowout, I think is not only an overstatement, but a misdiagnosis.
I thought it was a good game. I enjoyed it, and right up and toward the end. But so now we look forward to these 4 teams joining the Big Ten next year. Washington being one of those 4. And did we see a distinct difference in the style of the teams that are coming in as opposed to the teams that are here, like Penn State, who had a top-rated defense, Michigan, who had a top-rated defense, and then we look at Oregon and Washington and these guys throwing the ball all over the yard, completely different styles. So are we going to see a big clash of styles next year?
Well, that's an interesting question. And I think it's hard to say for sure because with the way college football operates now, if you're out at Washington or Oregon or Southern Cal or UCLA and you have concerns about whether your style can mesh with what you'll face in the Big Ten. If indeed you do, then you can address that immediately. You can go get a couple of defensive tackles in the portal, and maybe all of a sudden you're not the same style of defense. So I don't know that necessarily it's a significant difference because all of college football, I mean, maybe this Michigan team was somewhat of an exception, but all of college football has trended toward the passing game as its primary method of operation, and therefore defending the passing game has been the primary concern. Now, certainly Michigan did an elite job in terms of addressing the defense of the passing game, and it started with the pass rush, but it wasn't limited to that. I thought their coverage was very good as well. So I don't know if we'll see a huge difference between the styles. There may be somewhat of a difference with Michigan, but I do think that Michigan's team, the success they've had the last couple of years, it has been different than most of what's out there. They have been less dynamic in the passing game than Georgia, than Ohio State, than Oklahoma or Texas. They've been less dynamic in the passing game and more oriented toward ball control, success on the ground, breaking big plays on the ground. And they haven't been ineffective in the passing game. We've seen them hit long balls that really changed games. Alabama would be a good example of when that happened, but it wasn't a huge emphasis in the way they played. They didn't throw 35 passes a game. So I think that Michigan is different than most of the elite teams as it stands. And so therefore the change in style for the 4 West Coast teams will be more toward Michigan than necessarily the rest of the league.
And then the next question is, do we see Jim Harbaugh in the Big Ten next year, or is he in San Diego?
Well, if he's in San Diego, what's he going to be doing? Sailing a boat? There's nothing in San Diego.
I mean, Chargers. Damn it!
I was just pulling your chain. I do that all the time.
Somebody said it earlier. I'm like, what are you talking about? They had San Diego with a question mark. I'm like, the Chargers. The other day, I almost went through 3 names for the Raiders. I started to say Oakland, and I started to say Los Angeles. Then I'm like, damn it, it's Las Vegas.
Yes. I do that all the time. I was just teasing you. It's interesting. I think that if you leave a program or a team after you've won a championship, you're missing the best part of winning a championship. You get to surf that for years. I mean, you have to really be poor or over your head, as was the case, say, with Ed Orgeron. He just wasn't a great college football coach. And so you have to be, if you are at Jim Harbaugh's level, now you've won 3 Big Ten titles in a row. You've made the playoff. We don't have to worry about whether Jim Harbaugh can keep this going in or around this neighborhood. So why would you walk away from that? What's out there that you haven't? I mean, better weather. Okay, I'll go along with that. I mean, LA's got great weather. That's your one advantage of being the Chargers coach over being the reigning national champion, and not just the reigning national champion, but a former star quarterback who then went back to his school and won a championship at his alma mater. I mean, it's virtually impossible for him to run afoul of the Michigan fan base. I mean, he's given them years of great quarterbacking, and now he's given them years of championship football as a coach. So why would you walk away from that? To wake up to the sun
away from the
day?
NCAA mainly.
Oh, I don't think he's afraid of that. I don't think he's afraid of that at all. Because, and here's why, because Michigan had his back. If Michigan had reacted differently to either the revelations initially or to the Big Ten punishment, then I would say that, yeah, I'd be looking over my shoulder because my school, my employer doesn't believe in me and doesn't have my back. But it's the exact opposite of that. Michigan totally supported him. They couldn't have been more supportive. And there are lots of people who criticize that. But in this discussion, for the purpose of this discussion, what's important is that they had his back relative to why he would stay. And so I think that it's too pat, it's too easy, and that in the end he will sign a enhanced contract at Michigan and will remain. And coaches just don't walk away from this opportunity. You work your whole life for this, and you're like, okay, I got it, I'm leaving. No, that doesn't happen in real life.